I work late shifts at a printing shop off the highway, which means I usually get home after most of the neighborhood is asleep. Denton's a sleepy enough suburb, and my street in particular is the kind of place where people still leave lawn chairs out front without worrying they'll disappear overnight. I usually like that calm. It's easy to believe nothing bad ever happens here. It was a Thursday night in late October when I learned how wrong that was. I was driving home just before midnight, cutting through a side street I always take to shave a few minutes off. Street lamps there are patchy. One on the corner works, the next two don't. My headlights carved out their little tunnel of vision, catching mailboxes, for sale signs, and Halloween decorations drooping from porches. That's when I saw it. At first, it looked like a trash bag someone had dropped by the curb. A lumpy, pale shape lying on the pavement. I slowed, irritation on my mind. People around here hate litter, and some neighbor would raise hell about it. But then the outline sharpened into something undeniable. It was a person. They were flat on their back, arms splayed. The shirt was white, but across the middle was a massive blotch, red, dark, shiny in my headlights. Blood. My mouth went dry. I eased the car to a stop, maybe 15 feet away. My brain scrambled to make sense of it. A hit and run, some drunk who fell, a mugging. I'm not the kind of person who looks away from someone in trouble. I wanted to get out, to check their breathing, to do something. But then dread hit me. It was instant, primal, like someone had wrapped a cold hand around my spine. My hand reached for the door handle, and my body screamed, "Don't." I can't explain it. The figure didn't move. The road was silent, but every nerve I had fired an alarm. I sat there for what felt like forever, gripping the wheel, headlights washing over that still body. Finally, cowardice, or maybe survival instinct, took over. I pressed the gas and rolled past, not daring to look too long. By the time I got home, my hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped my phone dialing 911. The operator's voice was calm, rehearsed. I told her there was someone lying in the road. She asked questions I didn't want to answer. Was the person moving? Did I see if they were breathing? Could I describe the injury? My answers kept coming up the same. I don't know. I couldn't get out. She told me officers were on their way and advised me to wait inside until they arrived. I almost listened. I should have listened, but guilt was gnawing at me. I kept picturing some poor stranger bleeding out while I hid in my living room. Finally, I grabbed a flashlight and stepped back into the night. The walk was maybe 2 blocks, but every step stretched like rubber. The night was too quiet. Not even crickets. The closer I got, the heavier my stomach felt. When I reached the stretch of road where I'd seen them, I stopped dead. They were gone. The pavement was empty, clean. No stain, no body, nothing. My mind scrambled. Had I gotten the wrong street? Had someone helped them? My flashlight beams swept across yards, driveways, hedges. Empty. And then something moved. A shape rose from the shadows between 2 parked cars. Not slowly, not groggy or hurt. It stood with an awful, smooth quickness, like it had been waiting. Then it sprinted, straight toward me. I froze for maybe half a heartbeat. Then instinct took over, and I ran. My flashlight bounced wildly, the beam jerking across fences and asphalt. Behind me, footsteps thundered, faster than mine, pounding closer. The sound was wrong, too controlled, too deliberate. I tore around the corner, lungs burning, legs shaking. My house was in sight. The steps behind me suddenly veered off, cutting into a neighbor's yard. I risked a glance. The figure vaulted a low fence, then vanished into the dark. I slammed into my front door, fumbled with the keys, nearly dropped them twice before I got inside. I locked it, then locked it again. My chest heaved like I'd been drowning. When the police lights finally flashed outside, I almost collapsed with relief. 2 officers came up, notepad ready. I spilled everything. The figure, the sprint, the way it turned off. I was rambling, nearly incoherent. The first officer, younger, kept glancing at me like I might be drunk. The older one wrote calmly, until I said, "They were lying in the road, like dead, but then they got up and sprinted at me." His pen stopped. He looked at his partner. His whole tone shifted. "Can you repeat that?" he asked, slower this time. I did, word for word. He nodded once, clipped, like it confirmed something. He didn't look surprised. They searched the block, shining flashlights through yards. Nothing. No footprints, no drops of blood. After a while, the younger officer told me maybe it was a prank, some kids messing around. But the older one pulled me aside and said quietly, Stay inside after dark. If you see them again, don't approach. Call us right away." I asked if this had happened before. He hesitated, jaw tight, then muttered, "We've had calls." That was it. I didn't sleep that night. Around 3 a.m., lying in bed, I heard gravel crunch outside. Light, quick steps. I turned off my lamp and sat in the dark, holding my breath. The steps circled once, then faded. The next morning, in daylight, I drove the same road. Nothing there. No stains, no signs. My neighbor, an older woman who walks her terrier every dawn, stopped me. She asked if I'd seen the runner. "The runner?" I asked. She nodded, said sometimes late at night, she hears someone tearing down the block at full sprint. Fast, too fast. But when she looks, there's nobody. She chuckled nervously like it was just kids. But her eyes darted, uneasy. That week, I couldn't shake it. Every night, I triple-checked the locks. Every sound outside made me flinch. Then, 3 nights later, I woke to motion on my Ring camera. My phone buzzed. The preview showed a figure standing perfectly still in my driveway. White shirt, dark stain across the chest. Not moving, just standing, head tilted toward the camera. I froze, staring at the screen. No knock, no sound, no movement. I didn't even breathe. After nearly a minute, the figure bolted out of frame. Full sprint. My phone buzzed again, motion on the side yard. Then the backyard. Then silence. I didn't sleep at all. The police came when I called, but by then the footage was corrupted, just static where the figure had stood. They told me it was probably a tech glitch, but the older officer wasn't surprised. He just said, "Lock your doors. Don't go out at night." Now, weeks later, I still hear it sometimes. The pounding of fast footsteps on pavement, passing my window at full tilt, stopping right outside before fading away. And I know that whatever I saw that night wasn't drunk, wasn't injured, wasn't a prank. It was waiting, and one night, it won't veer into someone else's yard. One night, it'll keep running, straight through my door. I never used to think much about driving alone at night. I'd always tell myself the same things. This isn't a movie. You're not special. Nothing bad is going to happen. I live in a mid-sized city in North Texas, busy enough to feel like things are always happening, but not the kind of place that makes the news for violent crime. That night, though, I learned how fragile that illusion really was. I just left dinner with my friend Amanda around 10:30. It wasn't late by my standards, but traffic had thinned out and the streets felt quieter than usual. I wasn't drunk, not even buzzed. I'd had 2 iced teas and a plate of pasta. The only thing I was feeling was tired. I rolled up to a red light on University Drive, drumming my fingers on the wheel. That's when I noticed him. In the next lane over, slightly behind me, a white SUV idled. The driver leaned forward, both hands on the wheel, just staring at me. At first, I thought maybe I'd cut him off earlier, or maybe he just happened to be looking in my direction. But then the light from the overhead lamp caught his face. He was smiling. Not a friendly smile. Not even mocking. It was the kind of smile people make when they're imagining something. His eyes didn't leave mine. The light turned green, and I hit the gas. He waited a beat, then swung in behind me. For the first few blocks, I told myself I was being paranoid. He just happened to be going the same way. But when I made a right turn, so did he. When I slowed for a yellow light, he slowed too. Each time I glanced in my mirror, those headlights glared back, perfectly aligned with mine. I turned my music down. My breathing grew shallow. I decided to test it. I switched lanes. He switched. I sped up. He sped up. That's when the pit opened in my stomach. I wasn't imagining it. He was following me. I tried to reason it out. Maybe he lived in the same neighborhood. Maybe he was just another late-night driver with nowhere particular to be. But the longer it went on, the less likely that seemed. Every move I made, he mirrored. I pulled into a gas station, hoping the sudden turn would shake him. My heart leapt when he cruised right past. Relief rushed through me, until I saw his brake lights flare. The SUV swung around and pulled in after me, slow and deliberate. I panicked. I didn't even stop. I circled the lot and pulled back onto the road, my tires squealing. He followed. By now, my hands were slippery on the wheel. I kept glancing at my phone, wanting to call someone, but I couldn't afford to look away for more than a second. I kept hoping a cop would appear, or another car would get between us. But the streets were thinning, and each block felt emptier than the last. He rolled his window down at one point and leaned halfway out. I couldn't hear what he shouted over the roar of the road, but his voice was harsh, jagged. He gestured at me with his hand, pointing toward the shoulder, signaling for me to pull over. Every instinct in me screamed no. I took turns at random, zigzagging through streets I only half knew. He never dropped back. He was always there, looming in my mirror, sometimes tailgating close enough that I thought he'd tap my bumper. Other times he lagged just far enough that I'd think I lost him. Then, inevitably, those headlights appeared again. Minutes stretched into half an hour. It felt like an eternity. My chest ached from how hard my heart was slamming. Finally, near the edge of town, I hit road construction. Orange cones funneled traffic down to one lane. My pulse spiked. I was trapped. If he wanted to, he could box me in. But just before the merge, I spotted a narrow service road half hidden by barriers. On impulse, I jerked the wheel and shot through the gap. My car rattled over gravel as I tore down the unlit lane. Dust clouded in my mirrors. When I risked a glance back, the SUV wasn't there. I kept driving until I hit a residential block I recognized. Only then did I pull over, turn off my lights, and sit trembling in the dark. My whole body shook. I checked every mirror, every corner of the street, but he was gone. By the time I reached home, it was past midnight. I locked my doors, pulled my curtains, and sat on the floor with my back against the couch. Safe. Supposedly safe. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at me at that first red light. That grin. Those headlights locked on mine. The next morning, I forced myself to check my car. And that's when I saw it. On the back bumper, tucked just under the curve of the trunk, was a strip of silver duct tape. It was small, maybe 4 inches long, stuck flat where I'd never notice it. My stomach dropped. I'd read about this. Human trafficking posts, urban warnings I always thought were exaggerated. But the details were the same. Attackers mark a car with tape or stickers, something subtle, to signal that the woman driving alone is tagged. Easy prey. I pulled it off with shaking hands, staring at it like it was radioactive. The SUV driver hadn't been trying to warn me. He wasn't telling me something was wrong with my car. He was claiming me. I can't describe the cold that spread through me in that moment. It was worse than the chase itself, because it meant this wasn't random. It wasn't some unstable guy choosing me at the light by chance. He, or someone working with him, had already marked me before I ever left that restaurant. I was supposed to pull over. I was supposed to open my door. Now, every time headlights appear in my mirror at night, I tense until my knuckles ache. Every white SUV looks the same. I've changed my route home. I've added locks. I keep my phone in my lap when I drive. But sometimes I wonder if it matters. Because when I close my eyes, I still see his face in that wash of streetlight, grinning like he already knew where I lived. I've been a respiratory therapist for more than a decade. Nights, weekends, holidays, I've seen people at their weakest hours. I'm used to emergencies. I'm used to responding without hesitation. That's why what happened on the shoulder of that road unsettles me so deeply. I didn't know how to respond, because it wasn't an emergency I could name. It was close to midnight when I left the hospital after a 12-hour shift. I remember checking the dashboard clock and sighing at how late it was. My scrubs smelled faintly of antiseptic and latex gloves, and my body felt like it had been hollowed out. Still, I wasn't so tired that I could mistake what I saw. The highway wasn't crowded, but cars still blew past in quick bursts. I kept my speed steady, waiting for the final exit that would carry me closer to home. That's when I spotted a dark sedan pulled halfway onto the shoulder. No hazard lights, no hood propped, no flat tire visible, just stopped. It wasn't angled neatly like a car that had pulled over carefully. It sat slightly cockeyed, like the driver had swerved and simply quit there. I don't usually stop for stalled cars. It's not recommended, and I know better than to expose myself to strangers on the road. But instinct and training sometimes override reason. I've pulled over for seizures, for crashes, for people choking behind the wheel. If somebody was in distress, I couldn't stomach the idea of driving past. So I slowed, flicked on my flashers, and pulled up a car length behind him. The driver's door opened almost immediately, which startled me. He stepped out as though he'd been waiting for me. The man was mid-30s, maybe early 40s. His clothes weren't rumpled. He wasn't bleeding. He didn't look drunk or dazed in the way I'm used to seeing. Instead, he just stood there, facing me, arms slack, his head tilted slightly to the side. I called out over the rush of passing cars. "You okay? Need help?" For several seconds, he only stared. His eyes were wide, unblinking, locked on mine with a cold vacancy that froze me in place. Finally, he said, in a flat voice, "I don't know where to go." The way he said it didn't sound like confusion. It sounded like fact, like a verdict already delivered. I swallowed, forcing my tone to stay calm, professional. "Do you mean you're lost? I can give you directions. Where are you trying to get to?" He didn't move. His lips twitched as though the words took effort. "Anywhere but here." That chilled me worse than the October air. The phrasing, the delivery, it wasn't normal. He didn't sound panicked, or drunk, or sick. He sounded hollow, like something speaking through him. I took a careful step closer but stayed by my car door. I'd dealt with disoriented patients before, men who'd suffered strokes, women hypoxic from panic. I knew how to ground them, how to gently direct their focus. "You're safe," I said. "There's a hospital just a couple miles from here. I can point you." But he turned away abruptly, as though I hadn't spoken at all. His movement was sudden, jerky, wrong. He walked back to his sedan, climbed inside, and slammed the door hard enough I heard it over the highway noise. Before I could process what was happening, his headlights blazed on. He twisted the wheel, flooring it in a violent U-turn across 4 empty lanes. The tires shrieked as his car fishtailed, then steadied. He sped away into the dark in the opposite direction, disappearing as quickly as he'd appeared. I stood frozen on the shoulder, heart pounding, the echo of his words lodged in my mind. "Anywhere but here." After a minute, I got back in my car and sat gripping the steering wheel, staring at the empty lane where he'd been. I thought about following, but my better judgment screamed against it. Finally, I drove home, the silence inside my car louder than the wind outside. I barely slept that night. My mind replayed the scene on loop. His eyes, not glazed with drugs or illness, but focused, cold, unyielding. His stance, still but coiled, like someone waiting for something. The words, flat and strange, as if rehearsed. By morning, I convinced myself to check the local news. Maybe he'd been picked up for reckless driving. Maybe he'd been in an accident further down the highway. Nothing. Not a word. The next evening, I mentioned it to a nurse on my shift. She gave me a weary smile and said people behave strangely at night. Could have been schizophrenic, she offered. Could have been having a psychotic break. But I've worked in emergency medicine. I've seen psychotic breaks. I've seen people hallucinating, people combative, people incoherent. None of them stood that still, with that expression, and said words that landed like ice in my chest. Over the next week, I started avoiding that stretch of road. I took the longer way home, detouring through residential streets. Still, when I lay in bed at night, I couldn't stop hearing it. I don't know where to go. Anywhere but here. Sometimes, on my new route, I'd swear I saw a car stop ahead on the shoulder. The shape of a dark sedan. My pulse would spike, hands gripping the wheel. But by the time I passed, the shoulder was empty. One night, sitting at a red light, I felt compelled to check my rearview mirror. A car idled 3 vehicles back. Black sedan, headlights faint behind the others. My throat closed, sweat dampening my palms. When the light changed, I turned quickly onto a side street. The sedan didn't follow, but I drove the next 2 miles with my chest tight, my breath shallow. I don't know what I encountered that night. Maybe it was just a man having a breakdown, some random stranger who will never think of me again. But that doesn't explain the fear that hasn't left me since, or the way his words burrowed into my head and stayed there. He didn't say he was lost. He didn't ask for help. He didn't even act like I existed once he'd spoken. He just stated it, like a universal truth. He didn't know where to go, anywhere but here. And what terrifies me most is the thought that he wasn't talking about the highway at all. When I was 19, I thought horror stories belonged to other people. Ghosts, hauntings, curses, those were things you read about on message boards or heard whispered in campfire circles. Real life, I thought, had its share of terrors, but they were explainable. A break-in, a drunk driver, a bad storm. That belief didn't survive my first visit to the bridge. It was southern Indiana, summer break, when a friend of mine suggested we go check out the haunted bridge. Everyone in the county had heard some version of the story. Depending on who told it, the bridge had been the site of a lynching, a a murder, or devil-worshipping rituals carried out by a slave owner who supposedly went insane. The details changed, but the ending was always the same. If you went to the bridge at night, you'd hear screams in the woods. Sometimes, you'd see a red orb floating near the creek, and if you lingered too long, it would follow you home. There were 5 of us that night. Me, my buddy Travis, his girlfriend Megan, her cousin Amber, and my roommate Kyle. We were stuffed into Travis's old Honda Civic, bouncing along cracked county roads with the windows down and the smell of damp cornfields blowing in. We reached the bridge around midnight. It wasn't much to look at, just a narrow span of rusted steel over a shallow creek, surrounded by dense trees. The guardrails were tagged with graffiti, mostly crude jokes and pentagrams drawn by bored kids. Still, something about the place felt wrong. The air seemed heavier as we rolled across, like stepping into a room where a fight had just happened. Travis parked on the far side, cutting the engine. We all sat in silence for a moment, listening to the night sounds. A whip-poor-will called somewhere far off. Water trickled under the bridge. Then, faintly, we heard it. A scream. At first, I thought it was an animal. Coyotes sometimes made sounds like that, high-pitched, keening. But this was different. It wasn't the yipping chorus of a pack. It was a single, long wail, rising and falling like someone being dragged underwater. Megan grabbed Travis's arm. That's not a coyote. Before anyone could respond, something else joined the sound. Low, guttural noises, like growls, layered with something almost human. It came from the creek bed, deep in the darkness beneath us. Okay, nope, Kyle said. I'm not doing this. Start the car, man. But Travis, always the skeptic, only smirked. It's locals messing with us. Come on, you think this is real? As if on cue, the noises cut off. Silence pressed in, broken only by the faint creak of metal as the bridge shifted under its own weight. That's when Amber pointed. Look! At the far end of the bridge, hovering above the tree line, a dim red glow flickered into existence. Small at first, like the ember of a cigarette, then swelling until it was unmistakable. A red orb, hanging in the air, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. We all went still. What the hell is that? Megan whispered. The orb drifted closer, gliding soundlessly over the creek. My chest tightened. Something primal inside me screamed to leave, but Travis was frozen at the wheel, his skeptic smirk gone. Start the car, I said. My voice cracked. He fumbled with the keys. The Civic sputtered, caught, then died. The orb inched closer. Travis cursed, twisting the key again. The engine coughed, but refused to turn over. It's not. Goddammit, it's not starting. The red light grew brighter, no longer dim, casting faint reflections on the car's hood. It wasn't just glowing, it was watching. That's the only way I can describe it. Try again, Amber shrieked. The engine roared, then stalled. The orb was almost at the bridge now, hovering just above the rusted rail. The glow flickered across its metal beams, painting everything blood red. Finally, the car lurched to life. Travis slammed the shifter, tires screeching as we tore across the bridge. The orb followed. For the next mile, no matter how fast we went, the glow stayed with us, hovering just behind the car, steady, relentless. Every time we thought we lost it around a bend, it reappeared, sliding out of the trees like it was tethered to us. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. We burst from the tree line onto an open county road, fields stretching on both sides. The orb hung back at the edge of the woods, hovering motionless. Then, slowly, it sank down, disappearing behind the brush as if it had never been there. We didn't stop until we were back in town. Only when we pulled into a gas station under fluorescent lights did we dare to breathe. That's when Kyle noticed the handprints. On the passenger side doors, faint but visible in the glare, were smudges, 5-fingered, human-shaped, smeared downward as though someone had dragged their hands across the metal. The prints were darker than dust, almost oily. None of us had touched the doors during the drive. The rest of the night was a blur. We split up quickly, too shaken to hang around. I remember lying awake in bed, every light on, waiting for something else to happen. It didn't take long. Around 2 a.m., I heard knocking in my apartment kitchen. Not on the door, on the counters, the fridge, the walls. Sharp raps, irregular, as if someone walked through in the dark, brushing their hands across everything. I sat frozen on my bed, staring at the doorway, certain I'd see that red glow bleed through. It never came. The noises faded with the night. In the morning, my dishes were on the floor. A picture frame had fallen from the wall. When I asked Kyle and Megan later, both admitted they'd had disturbances too. Amber swore her bedroom door had slammed open at 3 a.m., though her house was locked. Travis didn't say much, but his eyes looked hollow, and he refused to ever drive near that bridge again. We told ourselves the orb couldn't leave the woods, that it stayed bound to that cursed strip of road. And maybe that's true. But even now, years later, I'll catch myself watching for a dim glow in mirrors or listening for faint animal sounds at night. Because I don't think the orb followed us home. I think something else did, and it still doesn't know where to go. I used to laugh at people who claimed their dreams meant something. To me, nightmares were just scrambled neurons, stress, junk food, maybe a scary movie bleeding into your subconscious. That ended one Tuesday in October, when my dead family told me I had one day left. The dream began in my grandmother's living room, the one she died in when I was 12. It was perfect in every detail. The crocheted Afghan on the armchair, the plastic fruit bowl on the coffee table, even the faint hum of her old refrigerator rattling in the kitchen. But it was the smell that froze me, menthol ointment and lemon polish. Dreams don't usually have smells, and yet it was thick in the air, choking, as if the house itself breathed it. My grandmother sat in her chair, hands folded. She looked exactly as I remembered, silver bun, floral blouse, those deep creases etched around her mouth. But she didn't smile. She didn't blink. "You don't have much time," she said, voice flat, unnatural. "We need to get you ready." Before I could ask what she meant, the room shifted. My grandfather appeared in the doorway, the one who had dropped dead from a heart attack in his 50s. His eyes were hollowed in shadow. Then others filled in behind him. My great-aunt, my uncle, faces I hadn't seen in years, all gray pale, their mouths moving just out of sync with their words. Their eyes never blinked, never moved away from me. They closed in, forming a circle. Daniel stepped forward. My cousin. He died 2 years ago in a car wreck, the twisted steel of his pickup wrapping around him like a coffin. He looked the same as he had at his funeral, but his lips barely moved. His voice came from everywhere at once, bouncing off the walls. "You have one day left." The circle tightened. My grandmother rose, and her cold hands clamped mine. "We must prepare you," she said. The others joined in, touching my shoulders, my arms, pressing their fingers against my skin. They weren't warm. They weren't cold. They felt empty. My aunt combed her fingers through my hair. My uncle straightened my collar. Daniel muttered prayers I couldn't understand. It was a ritual, a dressing for a journey. A funeral rite, but for someone not yet dead. I tried to pull back, but my legs locked in place. My grandmother leaned closer, her eyes so sharp they hurt to look at. "One day," she whispered. "Only one." I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. My alarm clock glowed 5:58 a.m., 2 minutes before it was set to go off. All day at school, the dream hung on me like a weight. Every hallway was too narrow, every classroom too dim. My friends teased me for looking pale, but I barely heard them. At lunch, I almost told Josh, but the words stuck in my throat. What could I say? "Hey, my dead relatives just gave me a countdown." He'd laugh, and I'd have to laugh with him, but I couldn't shake it. In every reflective surface, bathroom mirrors, the black screens of unused Chromebooks, I swore my face looked wrong. Hollowed out, like I was already fading. By 7th period, I was counting hours. The number 1 pulsed in my mind like a brand. That evening, Mom drove me to the school parking lot for driver's edition. I almost asked her not to. The dream was too sharp, too pointed. Daniel had died in a car. Now I was supposed to practice night driving, but the words never left my mouth. Mr. Peters, the instructor, was waiting by the battered white Civic the school used. He was in his 50s, wiry, with a scowl that seemed welded to his face. Everyone dreaded his sessions. He waved me into the driver's seat. "Night driving. Stay alert. Screw up once, you fail this unit." The car smelled of stale coffee and old sweat. I gripped the wheel, palms slick. For 20 minutes, we drove dark county roads. Nothing but fields and tree lines flashing past. The headlights carved narrow tunnels into the black. I tried to focus, but every bend reminded me of Daniel's accident. Every sign felt like a milestone counting down. "You're too tense," Peters barked. "Relax your grip. Tension kills." I forced my fingers to loosen, but my pulse only climbed. The dream replayed in flashes. The circle of the dead, their hands pressing me down. Daniel's echo. 1 day left. We reached the curves. A yellow diamond sign warned of a sharp right. The arrow looked jagged in the glow, like a warning carved by hand. My stomach dropped. I eased into the curve, knuckles white again despite myself. Peters grunted, but didn't stop me. Then the world exploded. Headlights burst around the bend, dead ahead, in our lane. Too close. Too fast. My body locked. I froze, hands welded to the wheel. Every instinct screamed to move, but my brain shut down, a deer in headlights. The oncoming car grew huge, seconds from impact. Then Peters lunged. His hands clamped over mine, wrenching the wheel hard right. Tires screamed. My shoulder slammed against the door. The Civic jolted onto the gravel shoulder, rocks spitting like gunfire. The other car roared past, horn blaring, the blast of wind rocking us. We skidded to a stop, both of us gasping. My chest heaved, throat raw. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Peters shouted, voice cracking with anger and fear. His face was pale, damp with sweat. "You freeze up like that, you're a corpse. Do you understand? Both of us dead." I couldn't answer, because in that moment, the truth hit me like the horn of that car still echoing in my ears. The dream hadn't been nonsense. It hadn't been metaphor. It had been a warning. If Peters hadn't grabbed the wheel, I'd be gone. My family hadn't lied. My cousin, my grandmother, they knew. They had dressed me for the afterlife. I made it home that night, but I didn't sleep. I sat in bed with the lights blazing, waiting for midnight to strike, waiting to see if I would wake up at all. When the clock finally ticked over, I exhaled, shaking, alive. Relief washed through me, but it didn't erase the dread, because I understood something new, something worse than death. The dead don't just wait for us. They can reach us. They can warn us. They can prepare us. And if they can prepare us, they can also decide when it's time.